Well, I'm a fan of yours, Chip. I admire your career, the things you've done. You've been an entrepreneur. You built a hotel chain, started as a very young man, 26 years old, I think.
Yep.
Built it into a $350 million company. And then I certainly watched your success at Airbnb and all that you did for that company and creating a brand where I just don't have that creative gene where I could see around the corner like you guys were able to. I remember hearing Travis present early in in the formation of the company at an Allen and Company event, and I said, "That's an interesting idea." Back then, he was showing a picture of an old airplane fuselage in a jungle as one of the facilities they were renting out.
Oh, well, it wasn't Travis. That would have been Brian.
Oh, Brian, I'm sorry. I was thinking
Travis,
the other one.
Travis,
The other one
yeah,
I didn't get was Travis Kalanick when I
yeah,
saw him present as a small
yeah,
private
yeah.
company.
No, no.
Let
Yeah.
me show you the holes in my wallet from not being able to see around the corner.
Oh, I know. Well, I have to say that when I was approached by the three founders of Airbnb, and I'd sold my company a couple years earlier, and Hyatt owns it, Joie de Vivre, and they call it JDV. When I first heard
I
Brian
can
tell,
understand why.
yeah, Brian told me the idea. I was like, "Well, do you have another idea?" I don't think that's going to work. And let me tell you all the reasons why it won't work. But it was also, I was a boomer and he was a millennial, and there was very different points of view about what you want to do on your travel. And so I had to really be open to the idea that I wasn't right. And I had to really say, my job here is to help you and your two co-founders be the best leaders possible, create the best culture possible. And if I do that well, then maybe this idea has a possibility. But yeah, I was there in the very early days, 13 years ago.
It took great ego strength on your part, I would think, to do that, and good for you because understanding the chemistry and what can come from the soup of the ingredients of all of you, it takes ego strength and wisdom.
Thank you for noticing that, Jim. I mean, a lot of people don't notice it, but to have been somebody who started my own company and grew it over 24 years to 3,500 employees and 350 million in revenue, and then to sell it at the bottom of the Great Recession, mind you. So I did well in my selling it, but I did not. If I'd waited 3 or 4 more years after the recession, it would have been better. And so to join Airbnb and to be twice the age of the average person there, and to be mentoring the three founders, but also reporting to Brian, who is the CEO and co-founder, who was 21 years younger than me, it absolutely required me to right size my ego, look at how do I, what defines success for me. Back in the day with my company, it was like, getting my name in the paper or getting my, picture on the cover of a magazine and
Which had
having,
all kinds of benefits, the obvious and the not so obvious.
that's right. And I had a lot of control, and all of a sudden I am not in control, and I can influence. And I really needed Brian to feel confident that my job was not to come in and have people look at me and say, "Oh, Chip's going to become CEO," because I was a longtime hospitality leader, and so long story short, I'm proud of myself. I really am. I appreciate you pointing that out.
How did working with all these young people and creating a new category and reinventing so many things, how did that shape how you spend your time now? How did these young people and the way they looked at things, not just youthfully, but with a tech first focus? How did that change the work you're doing now around, especially with your new book, Midlife Manifesto? And my copy is not as neat and clean as yours because I have all these paper clips in here of things I especially loved about it.
It's a very short read. Yeah, the thing about my experience at Airbnb was it confirmed to me that in my 50s, I would no longer be youthful, but I could be useful. And to be
You
useful,
use that term in Midlife
yeah,
Manifesto, and I
I
love it.
just think it's a great, simple term. And I think unfortunately, there are a lot of people who want to be youthful for the rest of their life. And yes, I want to be healthy and I want to be able to still exercise a lot. I'm 65 next month. I want to be able to be youthful on many levels, but that's not the goal of life. If the goal of life is to be youthful forever until you die, then you have missed, all kinds of other opportunities. And that's what started to become clear to me in my 50s. I spent 7.5 years at Airbnb, 4 years full-time, 3.5 years part-time. And I learned what it meant to be in a tech company for the very first time. I learned millennial travel habits and like what's it like to work in a company full of millennials. But I think more than anything, I really learned the possibility that we have a lot to learn from each other. I'm a boomer. You're probably a boomer.
I am. I'm almost 10 years older than you.
Okay. So as boomers, in past generations, the older you were, the more power you had and the more wisdom you had. But to be able to be at this age now and realize that I am learning as much from younger people as they're learning from me, and that kind of mutual mentorship is necessary because, Jim, by the year 2027, the U.S. Department of Labor says that the majority of Americans will have a younger boss.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Interesting.
yeah, so it's a whole different era, and we better learn from each other in a whole new way.
Look, we boomers, you being at the tail end, have changed everything we've touched. I can think back, my grandmothers, when I was a kid, were old women in their 60s. And now if you look at how magazines depict people in their 70s, they're in short, a nice workout shirt, on a bicycle, taking a hike up a mountainside. The media representation of people of different ages has changed dramatically in the past few decades.
Well, and it has because we have changed. There has been, although the U.S. doesn't do all that well on the global longevity scales, we're the 48th longest life expectancy for some, for all kinds of reasons, obesity and deaths by despair, suicide, guns, etc. So it's not good. But having said that, the world's longevity has just skyrocketed, as has the U.S. In the year 1900, the longevity in the U.S. was 47. By the year 2000, it was 77. And so we added 30 years of life in one century in the United States. And at that point, we were the number one in the world. But the bottom line is, the representations in the media match the fact that people are living longer, they're healthier longer. But what's really
and our attitudes about being older
that has too, exactly. And I think part of the reason why I started MEA, the Modern Elder Academy, was because I saw midlife being this life stage that nobody could quite understand. Like, what the hell is this midlife thing? Is it just the midlife crisis, or is there really a chrysalis? The idea that
I love the way you define that.
Thank you. The midlife chrysalis being this transformative era in one's life that can actually open you up to having a better later life. And that is, the data on this is very conclusive in terms of what's called the U curve of happiness, that shows that people get happier starting around age 50. In each decade, they get happier and happier. So I'm loving what I'm doing today, and I feel very fortunate that.
Now, how did that crystallize, Chip, in terms of you deciding, hey, here's an opportunity for me to have some fun, do some research, impact how I feel about things, and become the go-to expert on midlife? Did it evolve? Was it early in the process?
It was a an epiphany. So I was.
You are good at turning a phrase.
I am. Thank you, my friend. So I was in Baja. I was in Mexico on the beach. I had a home on the beach down there. I had finished my 4 years of full-time at Airbnb. I'd now moved to part-time. And I had some time to write a book called Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder. While I was writing that book, I was also pondering friends of mine who unfortunately had taken their own lives between ages 42 and 52. I lost 5 male friends during the Great Recession. And so I was just pondering them and thinking, I wish they'd gotten to, my age. At that point, I was 57. I wish they'd because my 50s, I was loving. And so I went on for a run on the beach as I was writing, and I had the epiphany on running on the beach, which was, why is there no such thing as a midlife wisdom school? Why isn't there a place where people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, or beyond, we've had people as young as 25 and as old as 92, average age is about 54 of people who come to MEA. Why is it that there's no school for people to make sense of what they've learned along the way and then repurpose it in all kinds of ways and really tap into their wisdom? And that's really what we are. We are, and we've got two campuses as well as online programs. We have 7,500 graduates from 60 countries, and we have 56 regional chapters around the world. So it is a bit of a movement.
I was intrigued by that when I read that you had all these chapters. what goes on in a chapter? Who is it? Only alum that wind up in these chapters, or is it alum and others?
Yeah, it's alums are the main part of our chapter. So if you have 56 chapters, they're all over the world. So, in New York, we've got, I think, 3 or 4 chapters based upon which part of New York you're in. It's alums who come together once a month, or in the more rural places once a quarter, to actually, have a guest speaker or a potluck, or listen to a TED talk together and then talk about it. So it's sort of it's a focus on long life learning, not just lifelong learning, but long life learning. The premise
Again,
that,
a clever turn of a phrase.
thank you, the premise that, lifelong learning, you could at 30 and 70 is the same thing. I want to become a photographer. Okay, go do it. But long life learning is the premise that in the course of one's life, it's really important, especially in midlife and beyond, to understand the life stages and to understand how do you create a long life that's as deep and meaningful as it is long. There's a lot of focus these days, as you know, Jim, on longevity. We tend to focus on the quantity and not the quality when it comes to longevity these days. So there's a lot of obsession around how long you will live, but not how well you'll live or how deep you'll live, or some of the more important questions. And I think both are important, depth and length. And so MEA really specializes in the depth piece of it. We also do longevity workshops and things like that. So it's not like we neglect the length.
I would suspect when your chapters come together in MEA chapters, and I would suspect that a couple of things are happening there. One is you find people, birds of a feather, people who are interested in living a better life, people who are interested in developing new relationships, having new experiences. And I would suspect that creates a wonderful sense of community, which is, by the way, self-fulfilling in terms of having better, healthier, longer lives.
Yes. Yeah. There's the number one variable for living a longer, healthier, and happier life is community, is your social relationships. And so if someone has an amazing experience, in a 5-day workshop in Baja or Santa Fe, wonderful. But we don't want them to then go back home and feel like, okay, now what do I do? Now you do have your cohort, and the cohort stays together, and they have Zoom calls at least once a month. But wouldn't it be nice to meet people, where you live, at home, who have been through the MEA program, have a common ethos, and then you can start going for hikes with them, or, going out to restaurants, or, doing a book club or something like that. And that's really what this is. And
Yeah, this sounds like a book club on steroids. But it's
ooh,
got all those other elements: common interest, genuine. By joining that, you're expressing an interest in being part of a formation and being an active participant in a community.
yeah.
That whole thing that, the one thing that we have in common, all of us, regardless of where we are or what language we speak, is a yearning and a need for and seek out of social intimacy.
Yeah. And I think it becomes even more important as we get older, because one of the things
And it's harder as we get older. You're making it easier. But I think about my life, 74 years old, just turned 74, and my wife and I have had this conversation several times, and I've mentioned it here a few times. We have to be deliberate. And one of the paper clips I put in here was about being deliberate about having friends of different ages. And that's something we're conscious of because, let's face it, we're losing friends for a number of reasons. One is they die. Health issues, or we live in the New York area, and so many of our friends are saying, I had the Florida home, but I don't need the big house up in New York anymore. I'm going to make full-time Florida our full-time residence. And that impacts us because we have a place in Naples, Florida. Most of the people from New York go to the East Coast of Florida. And so all of those little things, changing your work circumstances, your network, if you're not deliberate about maintaining it, will narrow.
Well, and not just maintaining it, but actually expanding it. And that's the key. That's the key. And a lot of people don't do that. And men in particular, Jim, let's be honest, that men are not as well socialized as women to actually make and maintain friends. Women have, I'm not saying anything that's not been found in social science here. So, and men also have a tendency during their working life to sort of have the two-pronged life. You have your family you take care of and you're with, and then you have your work. And so when the work goes away for many men, there's this big gaping hole, but their friendship muscle has atrophied. So so we do workshops at MEA literally on how do you help people to build friendship as a practice in life, thinking of friendship as not just sort of this nice to have, but a need to have. And what are the things you can do to be a better friend?
And one of the things that you talk about in the Midlife Manifesto is helping people. When you help someone else, we just had this conversation an hour ago here in the office. We were talking about some editorial work we're doing at Worth Media Group. And I was talking about a friend who had some time on his hand because he sold his business, and he started helping different organizations. And he was telling me that it was so good for him because he felt so good about being able to use his skills to help other people. It's like someone you may know, but I'm a fan of. Her name is Cynthia Covey Haller, and she wrote the book Living Life in Crescendo. So very complimentary to everything you've done. I love the title. It just sort of sums it up.
Jim, I think you and I are supposed to hang out together because the word crescendo is so.
It's not quite chrysalis, but it's
no, but it's crescendo's. There's a moment it's like the fat lady's going to sing and it's going to be beautiful.
Well, as she put it, you have your life. You could choose to live it in diminuendo, dun 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 dun, or in crescendo, dun 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 dun. And it sums the book up in that one phrase, Yeah.
So tell me more about how involved are you in the business these days?
Well, interesting. It just changed. I stepped down. I have a brother exactly your age, so 10 years my junior, and he took over for me 9 years ago as CEO. So I stayed full time as chair, and unfortunately, he had some health issues and had to step down a couple of years ago. He struggled to stay on for 2 years and then another 2 years where he stepped down. So I had to step back in for a short time. It turned out to be just short of 2 years. But the Wall Street Journal wrote in May, just before Mother's Day this year, that I fired myself. And indeed I did. And I hired a guy who was the first outside the family person to run the company. We'll be around 50 years next year. It'll be our 50th anniversary. And so my role has changed. I'm back to being chair. So I'm still here full time. But the fellow who we found, his name is Adolfo Villagomez, is a terrific guy. And he's completely different than me. I knew we needed someone with more and better skills than me. So he's very, very smart. So very different from me. And he's also... he had two interesting career situations. One, he's born in Mexico, very humbly as he put it, in Mexico City. He was able to get to university. His uncle insisted that he learn something practical, so he became a chemical engineer and went to work for DuPont in Mexico. Met his bride there, who was from similar circumstances in Mexico City, and they've been married for approaching 30 years now. They have 3 children, and they decided to emigrate to the U.S. He got into the Yale School of Management, where our friend Jeffrey Sonnenfeld is the associate dean. He got his MBA and then was recruited to McKinsey. Spent 13 years there, became a senior partner, ran a couple of national practices based in Atlanta. A very smart man named Ted Decker, who's the current CEO of Home Depot, said, I needed to find new people who didn't grow up in the organization so that we had a more diverse and different experience set in the highest ranks of Home Depot. So he recruited Adolfo there. Adolfo ran their .com business, took it to $400 million in sales, $400 billion in sales, and also was a CMO at the same time. Decided to move on when Ted, his friend and mentor, became the CEO because he wanted to be a CEO, and that's when we had a chance to talk to him. So the combination of the rigor of McKinsey and how to think things through in that kind of very creative yet regimented kind of way, and then having 13 years of, almost 9 years of retail operating experience in the digital world, digital transformation, I thought, wow, this is a perfect guy. So he's very focused, very detailed, very metric, and that's what I was looking for on my checklist. So he's been in since just Mother's Day now, so mid-May. And I think he's making a world of difference here. And I think he's going to prepare our company this year for some really exciting growth opportunities ahead of us. The things that I wanted to ask you about in terms of AI and how it impacts
Can I
your
make
thinking
a
in the
point though
world.
here? You started your company when you were 24,
I did.
and I was 26. I love that.
So you're a late bloomer. October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, a time to celebrate people of all different kinds of abilities. This year, Smile Farms gathers for our 10th annual gala here in New York City at the Ziegfeld Ballroom. It's a wonderful time to celebrate 10 years of creating wonderful work and job opportunities and brighter futures. I invite you to join us. Visit smilefarms.org to be part of this wonderful celebration. Help us prepare for the work that lies ahead. But AI, I think, is going to really revolutionize our company in two different ways. I think AI having the impact on efficiencies, those are obvious for us to see. You can do more things more creatively, quicker, efficiencies. And then capabilities, the capabilities we can create that will be tools to help our community, our customers, to have more and better relationships, whether it's a product or it's a service or I release a tool at the beginning of each year. I say that, and I do a newsletter each week. And I write mostly about relationships and using the calendar as an excuse to think about reconnecting. So this past couple of weeks, I've been talking about Grandparents' Day, which just passed, and how it's an important time to think about the role of grandparents. And we as grandparents, not just to sit back and say, hey, did you remember? Or did you send me a card? But to say, hey, what do I do with that wonderful day? And then the thought to plan things with my grandkids and plan special opportunities, or what I want to write to them about on Grandparents' Day, how I'm thinking about them and what I'm excited about for their future and their lives. So it's all about relationships, using the calendar as an excuse to think about connecting. And so I'm excited. At the beginning of the year, I always write about resolutions. So we make resolutions about we're going to exercise more, we're going to change our diet, we're going to read more books, we're going to learn a language, all of those things. And I always suggest that you're deliberate about your relationship resolutions. The relationships you have that you want to continue to invest in. The relationships that you had, but maybe they've waned a bit now, and you want to think about reinvesting in them. And the relationships you don't yet have, but you want to develop, you want to be deliberate about. Maybe it's someone in your community, a couple of people at work, and how do you develop a plan around those? And now we've built that into an AI tool that helps you to say, well, you want to get to know Chip better. And yet I look, and you gave me permission, I look in your text and your emails, you haven't written anything to Chip. You haven't connected in any way. I just read that Chip's new book, the Midlife Manifesto, was featured on the Today Show. You might want to drop Chip a note. And here's an example of what you might want to say, and feel free to edit. So having those kinds of capability tools that AI can present, it gets very, very exciting for us in terms of what we can do to be helpful. So how do you think about how AI changes your world personally? And then how it changes your community about how they think about the future?
Well, I mean, what's been interesting is if this was a year or two ago, we heard a lot more fear around AI in terms of the robots.
Job destruction.
Yeah. Job destruction is going to happen. So there's I think two kinds of fear. There's the fear that the robots will take over the world and then they'll kill all of us or whatever it's going to happen. And that I think that people have gotten so used to using AI now that they can see the upside and they're a little bit less fearful of the downside. The job destruction piece is a real thing. And that's sort of the nature of an entrepreneurial culture. The question is, what are we going to do to help support people to, find new forms of work? And of course, new kinds of positions open up as a result of new technologies. So overall, I'm pretty bullish about it.
How do you think it applies in your old world, the hospitality world, the hotel hospitality world, and then the intermediary hospitality world that you created at Airbnb?
There is some evidence that robots will take on more and more of the housekeeping service. And that's, been in Japan in particular, that's been happening.
The waiter's not going to knock on your door. No. Robo will.
No, yeah, and I just think that that's we're years and years away from seeing the service/hospitality business have a dramatic change in-person service. Having said that, there's all kinds of things that AI can do. If AI understands me, it's going to be able to help me decide, which hotel to stay in, and which is a better fit for my personality or what my interests are.
Well, if I want to go on this trip, help me to plan my itinerary.
That's right. That's right. So, and I think for Airbnb, I think that's going to be a big piece, because actually one of the Airbnb's biggest challenges, is that there's too much choice. So there are millions of listings, and or I'm going to London, and there's 30,000, 40,000 listings to choose from. AI will help customize and be like a lifestyle curator for us. So I think that's all possible. I do think that there's another piece to it, though, and this is where I put on my Midlife Wisdom School founder hat. I do think that, it was Peter Drucker who coined the term knowledge worker in 1959, before most people had ever seen a computer. And he said the future world of business will be ruled by knowledge workers, because making good decisions will be enhanced by computers and information technology. He was right. Knowledge management became a big deal in the 1980s. But today, all of the world's knowledge is on this little magic stone, my iPhone, in my pocket. And so in many ways, we have commoditized knowledge, but wisdom is more scarce than ever. So I think that, one of the things I'm excited about is the idea that artificial intelligence needs to be balanced by human wisdom. And human wisdom, and not just in how we use AI, but in terms of all of the qualities of humans, whether it's intuition or empathy, or values. There's all kinds of things that we can do as humans that an AI chatbot can't do as well as we can, at least not yet. So this idea that wisdom is making a comeback, wisdom was really big time in 2,000 years ago, with the Greeks wearing their robes and Socrates spouting things to young people in the village square. But today, I think wisdom is going to make a comeback, because I think companies that actually can make sense of what they're learning along the way on a human level and then act accordingly. I've been doing an exercise since I was 28, Jim, which is, I call it my wisdom book. And I took a little journal like the one I've got right here. And one weekend, when I realized I was an idiot at 28 and a CEO of this boutique hotel company, I thought at 26 when I started it, I knew everything. And by 28, I realized I knew nothing. It probably sounds familiar to you. And at 28, I started this practice that I've been doing for 36 years now, which is every weekend I sit down and I make a list of my biggest lessons of the week and how that lesson will serve me in the future. Because I believe our painful life lessons are the raw material for our future wisdom.
That's the page I had open to just ask you about right here. I love that. It reminds me, I had the opportunity, Chip, to get to know one of the great entrepreneurs of American history, Wayne Heisinger.
Oh, yes.
And he was a friend and a mentor. Pardon me?
Miami dude. He's from Miami.
Fort Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale. Okay, got it.
And he created 5 different Fortune 500 companies. Just amazing. But in conversation, I was sitting in his conference room with him one day, and we were talking about things, and he was telling me about a silly mistake he made. And what I saw him doing was taking something that must have been embarrassing and humiliating at the time, and he told and retold about himself, self-deprecating. And what I learned from him, and I asked him about that, and he said, look, it was painful, but if it happened to somebody else, it would have been funny. But it happened to me, it was painful. So I just turned it around and looked at it like an outsider would and made it so if I could laugh at it, the pain eventually went away.
That's me. That is how I've seen it. That's how I teach people at MEA around how do you have the objectivity and the sense of humor and get your ego out of the way to say, I am getting wiser as a result of this painful life lesson. And
but if you have that skill, your painful life lessons are the raw material for your future wisdom. When you're talking to someone who maybe just went through something, or it's yourself, and you say, "Wow, this is painful," but Chip Conley reminded me in his book, the Midlife Manifesto, that if I change my attitude about this occurrence and I begin to think, this is a joke I'm going to tell someday, it helps you to get over the pain, learn the lesson and get over the pain of it and turn it into something that's useful and positive down the road.
And not take it so personally. Yeah. I mean, as we get older, we lose our sense of smell, sense of, our eyesight, our hearing, but hopefully we don't lose our sense of humor. And when you see the people who live long, healthy lives, so many of the comedians that are famous live to be 100.
I told this story over the last week, or mostly my daughter and wife told the story. We were together, my daughter, a husband, and 3 kids, and my wife and I were at a party at a beach here on Long Island, at a beautiful club on Long Island. And they had this beautiful balloon archway at the entrance from the deck to the walkway down to the beach. And I said, oh, there's a great spot for a family picture. Why don't we go over there? And we're walking over, and a couple comes up from the beach. And I don't pay much attention to them. But they decide to stop right in the middle of the arch, and a fellow who was with them takes a picture of them. So I go over to them and I say, you look very nice in that picture. You're so good at being a subject of a picture. Would you mind taking a picture of my family? And so the fellow says, oh, no, I wouldn't mind doing it all. And my wife and daughter are embarrassed because I don't know that it's Cindy Crawford and our handsome husband, one of the inventors of Casamigos. And she said, the two of them looked at you like you were nuts. You're oblivious to who they are. But I enjoyed them embarrassing me about it. Now I tell the story to embarrass myself,
Yeah. No, if we get it right, Jim, we learn our lessons along the way, and we do something that the developmental psychologist Erik Erikson calls generativity. What we learn is that we are supposed to be we're supposed to be a catalyst for teaching other people who are younger than us what we're learning along the way. I define wisdom as metabolized experience, in other words, life lessons, mindfully shared for the common good. Because wisdom, unlike being savvy or smart, is meant to be a social good. But the mindfully shared is critical because there was a few years ago, there was this meme, okay boomer. They said like, okay boomer.
Yes, yeah, sure.
And the story was basically an older guy in the office was telling a younger woman in the office how the world worked. And he was trying to he thought of his war stories as wisdom. And the truth is he probably had some lessons there, but the way he was bringing it up to her, he wanted her to sit at his feet as if, she's supposed to learn from him. And so metabolized experience, mindfully shared for the common good, that is really what wisdom is.
At Harry and David, we work with our hands as well as our hearts, so you can enjoy sharing it as much as we enjoy making it. And that's what life's really all about, sharing with those we're closest to, no matter how far we are apart. Harry and David, share more. Earlier, and one of the other pages I paper look at me here, a hardcover, not a hardcover, but a hard paper copy book with paper clips. How nouveau am I? But I'll come back to a subject you touched on before. This page talks about, this is page 32, attract intergenerational pals.
Yeah.
At your academy, how do you talk about that?
Well, one of my first questions I like to ask when I get to know somebody and they want to talk about intergenerational, I will say, let's have you write down the 5 people you're most, intimate with that are not family members, people who know you well, who you really care a lot about. Write down their name and then their age. Okay. They write that down. And then I say, what percentage of those 5 or how many of those 5 are either 10 years older than you or 10 years younger than you? And what we constantly find is that 80% of people's intimates are people within 10 years of their age. So we don't have a very good ability to sort of build relationships outside of our generation or outside of our sort of age bracket. And there's so much to be learned there. So, I learned it at Airbnb, but I also learned it. There's this big event called Burning Man every year. And I was the first board member of Burning Man. Who knew Burning Man had a board?
No kidding.
Yeah, I was the first Burning Man board member.
It sounds antithetical.
Exactly. It sounds very antithetical. But yes. So, but again, that was a festival that had people of all ages. And
we have friends from Long Island who go to it every year, and we crack up because they're older than we are. And they're just the most wonderful couple. They also do something really interesting that would fit into your genre, into your group of thought. He was a teacher. He's in the real estate industry now, and he was a coach. And he and Dan and Joy, and they compete in the Senior Olympics.
Oh, yeah.
They travel all over the country competing in these events. She's the reigning high jumping champion above years old. And they're on their way to Europe for the international games in just a couple of weeks. And it's become a part of their life. They train all the time, but not like crazy. But I saw him recruiting someone one time. We were at a party, and he sees this woman across the room, 91 years old. And he punched me, tapped me on the arm, and he said, look at her, because she had just stood up out of the chair. He said, did you see how gracefully she stood up out of that chair? I said, I really hadn't noticed. He goes, I think she'd be good at the Super Senior Olympics. And he went over to recruit her.
Well, I love it. Yeah, the value of intergenerational relationships, you have them with your grandkids because they live near you. But for so many families in the United States, the grandparents live here, the parents live there, the kids live there, and we don't have the multi-generational families living in the same home together.
Which pre-boomer generation was the norm.
That was the norm, exactly, and it's still the norm in some communities. Still the norm to sometimes in the African American community,
ethnic communities,
and Latino, exactly. But for the vast majority of Americans, you don't have that. So we need to actually reintroduce that, and that's really what we try to do. We have workshops that are intergenerationally focused. We even now have workshops for purely millennials and Gen Z, which is funny because you don't think of them as modern elders, but they are young. The younger you learn your wisdom, the younger you learn your wisdom management tools and practices, the longer you have to use your wisdom.
I'm thinking I, as a single person here, very lucky because I live in a community where, in the general area where I grew up, definitely not the same community. I grew up in the Goodfellas community. That movie was set in my neighborhood, and I knew many of those characters. But you talked about forget about being youthful, be useful. Let's come back to that for a minute. In my life, I've had this experience in the last almost 10 years now. I'm the oldest of 5. My brother I told you about, Chris, is the youngest of the 5 of us, 10 years my junior. 2 sisters and a brother in the middle. Brother in the middle was born with developmental disabilities, lives in a wonderful group home here on Long Island. He's doing well, he's thriving. But the fellow who runs the agency that runs that group home, who started it 47 years ago and now takes care of 8,000 people every day, saintly guy named Walter Stockton, he came to my brother Chris and I a little over 10 years ago and said, your brother Kevin would be doing a lot better if I could find him a job in the community. And I have about 300 or 400 other people I'd like to find jobs for that I can't in the same circumstance. So he gave us the idea to create something called Smile Farms, where we used our day jobs here at the flowers companies. We bought a piece of land, we built greenhouses on it, and we created an environment where 36 people with developmental disabilities have a full-time job growing product, plants, foodstuffs. And we now have more than a dozen campuses, and we have about 600 people. But we have to fundraise all year round to do that. So the benefit I didn't anticipate, and there have been many, and we've been successful, but the need is so overwhelming. The frustration is we need to go much bigger and much faster here. But along the way, it's been very good for my family, because the lessons we learned from our parents about organizing people with common need, even if you had nothing, is important for them socially, for the siblings of the child with special needs. At the flowers companies here, to have all these Gen Z and millennials who everyone said are selfish or wouldn't give of their time, volunteer all the time. We get 40, 50, 60 volunteers for all of our fundraising events. They take their time off. I get to know them better. We form real relationships. My kids, the next generation, my grandkids now, taking time off, special half days from school to go volunteer when we have a golf outing or a big gala in November in Manhattan. And it gives me an excuse to have relationships with multi-generational folks. So I didn't anticipate when we started this 10 years ago how many personal benefits we, our company, our community would get out of doing good stuff. But it's also a lesson on a smaller scale for people. If you want to work alongside people of different generations, you can volunteer, make a difference, feel good about it yourself. And by the way, have an excuse to interact with people that might blossom into different kinds of relationships.
They've shown that when in nursing homes, when they give older people some potted flowers or plants to take care of and water, and that those people are more likely to live a longer life because they have purpose, they have a sense of usefulness, and it can be very small. It doesn't have to be big. In fact, as you get older, it may be smaller and smaller, but there's something that gets you up in the morning and gives you a sense that you have value in the world.
Chip, I have a new friend in Florida, in Orlando. His name is Jason Eichenholz. Very, very successful tech entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And he has a son named Jonathan, and he's creating Jonathan's Landing in Orlando, which will be a mixed-use community, primarily focused on people, young adults who have on the spectrum. And they're going to have a combination of senior living there, which I love. I love that idea because I think it's going to be a vibrant community. And he has a deal with the University of Central Florida where they're going to have students living in this campus, a community for about, I think it's about 1,000 people. But it's going to be a mixed community. And he created a work environment for people on the spectrum to do things like Apple product repair. He just got authorized to do that. So I think, like you said, right, people with one situation helping people in another situation just creates a really virtuous cycle.
Yep, totally agree.
So what's next for you, Chip Conley?
Well, I have these 2 campuses in this community. And
will there be more campuses?
There is another campus that will be in Santa Fe, actually in town. Our campus that's just out of town is a 2,600 acre horse farm. But in town, we'll have a longevity campus that's exclusively focused on longevity. But residential, I like to disrupt things. I was a disruptor as a boutique hotelier. I was a disruptor at Airbnb, and I'm a disruptor now with MEA around higher education and learning. But what I'm really interested in is disrupting senior living and the idea of retirement communities. And my parents live in a town.
It needs it.
I know. My dad's 88 this month. My mom's 87. They like where they are, but I can't imagine I would live in a place like that. And I might, but we'll see. And so we have created a residential community in Baja in Mexico with 26 homes around a regenerative farm. And now we're doing a series of residential communities here in Santa Fe. And so I just like disrupting things. So the idea of regenerative communities as opposed to retirement communities is high on my list. So yeah, that's another thing I'm working on.
Consider a group home and part of that community for people with special needs.
Love it.
So if people wanted to get in touch with you, Chip, to find out about your blog, your newsletter, your podcast, the next book you have coming out, these community chapters that you have, the MEAs, how do they get in touch with Chip Conley and all things about leading your best and most fulfilling life?
So chipconley.com is my personal website. The MEA
ChipConley.
Exactly. And the MEA website is meawisdom.com. Mm-hmm. And that's where you'll find both my podcast, which is a weekly podcast, as well as my daily blog, which is called Wisdom Well. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to write me,
I see your stuff on LinkedIn all the time.
Yeah. And I post my daily blog there. And I'm working on a couple new books. So can't talk about them yet because they're pretty early, but yeah, I love writing.
Well, I love your energy. And when you talk about wisdom, hey, fella, you got it.
You do too. We learn from each other. Wisdom is not taught, it's shared. And it's meant to be shared.
Chip, thanks so much. It's just been a treat to talk to you, get to know you a little bit. I hope we get to do it again soon.
Thanks so much.